Good evening. Welcome to the Southbridge School Committee meeting. Tonight is Tuesday, April 28th, 2015. Please join the school committee in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. The time is 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Mrs. Congdon?
Present.
Mr. Oliva?
Present.
Dr. Page?
Present.
Mrs. Donovan?
Present.
Mrs. Quinney?
Present.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Present.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Present.
All present.
Thank you very much. Now on the agenda is public input. Is there anybody from the public who would like to address the school committee this evening?
Good evening. Sean Moriarty, 44 Maggie Lane. Just come up briefly in reference to something we brought up last night, and that is this upcoming weekend, Saturday, there is a double header of events which benefit both the food share program here in town, but also the recently reformed Middle High School Booster Club. There are two events at the Middle High School softball field, 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. There will be an alumni game between former baseball and softball players of the Pioneers years gone by. And if anybody's still interested, we have it pretty well covered, but we could still use a few extra bodies just to be safe. Feel free to touch base with myself or Councilor Carrasco. But more importantly, or not more importantly, but in terms of looking for numbers, at 7 o'clock we will also have a game, town hall officials and employees going against the school side. And the town hall side has many numbers. I wouldn't say it's the most talented group per se at the moment, but we certainly could use more on the school side as well. I know at the moment school committee member Olivo has offered to play. I know a couple others that have taken part in other events will not be able to because they won't be around, but if anybody up here on the dais, whether students, central office, or school committee, or anybody at any of the schools, quite frankly, that want to come out and support the Booster Club for your middle high school, again, feel free to let us know, touch base. Again, that's 6 o'clock is the alumni game, 7 o'clock would be the town and school game. They're both slow pitch, co-ed softball, friendly games, hopefully. And we just ask that people, if they do come, to either and or bring some non-perishable goods for food share, as well as to bring some cash to help out your middle high school Booster Club. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moriarty. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to address the school committee this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is approval of the consent agenda. There are no items on the consent agenda this evening. Chairperson's announcements. I do not have any specific announcements. I was hoping to give this time to DESE for their quarterly progress report, which is the next item on the agenda. So I'd like to welcome to the podium, please, Mr. Rob Curtin, Ms. Laura Rashane, and Ms. Patricia Williams. Good evening, and thank you for coming.
Good evening. Madam Chairwoman, Superintendent Stanton, thank you very much for having us. My name is Rob Curtin, and I'm happy to be back here in front of you tonight. I am the director of the Center for School and District Accountability at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And my comments will be brief before I turn it over to my colleagues for a more formal presentation. We are here tonight to present to you a progress report on a quarterly progress report on the Accelerated Improvement Plan, and to make sure that we have provided you with the information that you need to have on each of the objectives that are in the report. I believe you've been provided with a copy of it in advance of the meeting that you hopefully you've had a chance to look at. So my colleague Laura Rashane will walk through that report for you. And be able to answer any questions. Also, Pat Williams is here, who is the monitor for the district, can answer any questions you might have also. So the two of them will be able to answer the more detailed questions than I am able to answer. The second point that I want to make before I turn it over to my colleagues is to very quickly remind you that we are on schedule for a district review of Southbridge. The exact dates are still being worked out. The one caveat that I need to say about this is that it is subject to appropriation. It is a line item in the state budget, so we are dependent upon that happening. But we are on schedule. Southbridge will be one of the first districts that we review in the 15-16 school year, so we tend not to come into school districts in September. So that would put us on target for one of the first couple weeks of October would be roughly what we'd be looking at. I will be in touch with the superintendent as soon as I can nail down those dates. More importantly, as soon as I can nail down the funding to do that. I will set those dates, communicate both informally and with a formal letter to the superintendent to announce the dates that we will be coming for the review. I briefly, last time I was here, went over the review that, and sort of the protocols. Very quickly, if I can just go over that, just to bring everybody up to speed, since it's the last time I will probably be in front of you, or I might be in front of you before that review. We send a team of independent reviewers. There are no ESE staff on the review team, with the possible exception, sometimes we send a staff member to help with scribing. But we will send an independent team in. They will be on site in Southbridge for usually 4 days, meeting with officials in the school department, local officials, union officials, building leaders, and teachers. They will also observe classrooms in each of the schools in Southbridge. And then what comes out of that 4-day site visit is a written report. You may have seen others that have been published before. They are available on our website to see, but they come with a written report comes out of the review, and then I'm happy to come back and present that report to you if that would be helpful to you. Some school committees take me up on that offer, some do not. It is up to your school committee to decide whether or not you'd like me to come back and present those findings to you, but I'm happy to do that if that's the case, but that's for next fall. So more presently, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Laura Rashane from my staff. She is going to walk through a formal presentation of the progress report on the Accelerated Improvement Plan for you. Pat Williams and Laura will be able to answer any questions that you might have, and we're happy to take as many questions as you have, since you have our full attention for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to see all of you again. Thank you for having us. The report that we'll be discussing tonight covers the period of January through March. The monitoring activities this period included participation in several district meetings as well as school visits. And just by way of an overview, during this period, obviously there was a leadership transition in the district. That reorganized leadership brought shifts in emphasis, as would be expected, and one notable example of that is an increased presence of district leaders in schools. The district has continually revisited and has been updating the Accelerated Improvement Plan. As part of that process, there was a meeting in February with the purpose of reflecting on and clarifying the focus of the AIP, particularly given the transition in leadership. That meeting included district leaders, school leaders, teachers, the plan manager, plan monitor, other representatives from the department, as well as representatives from the district and school assistance center. And so subsequently, district leaders used information from that meeting, as well as their own reflection and analysis, in order to revise several AIP benchmarks for the remainder of the year. So our next report will include those updated benchmarks. As well, the monitor's observations and information and data reported by the district indicate that there remain challenges at Southbridge Middle High School, which I'll describe in more detail. So I'd like to just briefly go over each strategic objective. Oh, thank you. The first strategic objective relates to improving curriculum and instructional practices. District leaders became aware that some benchmarks in the AIP were not easily measured using the existing Learning Walk model, and so they have been revisiting that approach and have begun to identify ways to improve that model. And that process has included receiving training from the DSAC about a Learning Walk protocol. But throughout this process, district leaders have continued their work in schools. So this is just something that they're rethinking. Other implementation under this objective, prior AIP reports described plans for meeting the needs of student subgroups, specifically English language learners and students with disabilities. So the next phase of that planning work during this period included planning related to professional development and staffing to address those identified needs. So the next steps related to this objective relate to or include curriculum revision, which is planned for this summer. So we're suggesting that the district carry through with those plans, and that district leaders continue their school visits with an intense focus on instruction and on principals' instructional leadership. And as well, we recommend that the district continue to implement plans to meet the needs of English language learners and students with disabilities. The second strategic objective is to expand and embed the use of data, K-12, to foster a cycle of continuous improvement throughout the district. A great deal of data related to this objective was analyzed during this period. Data from the second and third administrations of Achievement Network assessments became available. ANET results on the second administration were mixed. There were some grades and subgroups that met the benchmark for A2, the second administration. A3 was still being analyzed at the time this report was written. This analysis provided an opportunity for the district to reflect about practices currently in place. So some examples of that include the fact that the district realized that there are some issues with coding that makes aggregation of data difficult, so that's something that they are working to address. Another issue raised was some misalignment between standards taught and the standards that were assessed on ANET. So again, the plan to revise and align curriculum this summer, our understanding is that we'll address that in advance of implementing the new MAP assessments next year. Another issue that arose from the data analysis was the issue of separating high and low performing students into different classrooms at the elementary level, which is a concern. There was a great deal of data from Southbridge Middle High School as well. At the middle school level, compared to the end of the second quarter last year, there were some improvements in tardies. There were some indicators that remained flat. However, the number of course failures and the number of students failing courses increased compared to this time last year. The number of students suspended by the end of the second quarter was the same as last year, but the number of suspension days increased to a total of 187 days by the end of the second quarter. At the high school level, proficiency on high school quarterly assessments was very low. Data for other indicators was also concerning. The number of suspensions increased compared to the same time last year, as well as the number of suspension days. The number of courses failed and the number of students failing courses also increased compared to this time last year. I do want to point out that in many cases there was improvement between quarter one and quarter two this year. However, there were still some declines compared to last year, which is the AIP benchmark, comparing one period of time to the previous years, the same point in the previous year. And district leaders report that AIP strategies for supporting students at Southbridge Middle High School have not been well implemented. So the next steps related to this objective include those related to data analysis, continuing the analysis of A3 so that that can be compared to A2. Reviewing, in light of the data analysis, the effectiveness and the equity of classroom assignment policies at the elementary level, and urgent attention to the Southbridge Middle High School, in particular understanding the reasons for the low outcomes on the engagement indicators that I mentioned, and identifying specific and intense supports for students that can be implemented right away. The third objective relates to improving educator effectiveness. So as I mentioned, the superintendent and assistant superintendent have been visiting schools weekly, providing feedback on instruction and on principals' feedback to teachers. There's been training for coaches and for teachers related to improving instruction. and that the district reports that mid-year evaluations of teachers have been completed on time. The next step related to this objective relates to the submission of the 2015-16 Accelerated Improvement Plan. Right now, the district is planning to submit that in June and is looking to continue clarifying benchmarks in order to gauge progress related to teaching and learning. And finally, the fourth objective relates to, focuses on increasing parent and community involvement to enhance student learning. So principals reported numerous parent outreach activities at all schools during this period that had strong attendance, and there were also multiple forms of communication. And so the next step the district is planning is to deliver a survey at the end of the year to gauge parents' families' feelings about whether they are more informed and supported by the schools. So that will be an important next step. So as you know, every strategic objective in the AIP receives 2 ratings, a process rating, which relates to the implementation of that initiative, and a performance rating, which relates to progress toward goals for each initiative. So for process ratings, all AIP initiatives receive a rating of technical implementation, which means that the stated activities have been completed, but more work or time is needed for that initiative to be fully executed. For performance ratings, most initiatives received a rating of partially reached performance goals, indicating that there has been some progress, but more is needed. And the exception to that is Initiative 2.2, which is to use a variety of data to identify and develop support systems and practices to improve the performance of ELL and SWD students. Data from the district, particularly from the middle high school, indicates that students are not yet receiving the supports that they need to fully succeed. So that does it for our overview. Pat and Rob and I are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions? I'll go to this side. Anybody have questions over here? Dr. Page?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So you mentioned several times that the students aren't receiving the supports they need, in particular ELL. Can you give us an example of what types of supports that you think we're lacking and what it would take to address those particular needs?
So actually, there's a footnote in the report that describes several strategies that are laid out in the Accelerated Improvement Plan. And when we initially reviewed the plan and approved it, those really seemed to be high-quality strategies. So one example is a student advisory, an ombudsman program, some different programs that would provide individualized attention to students. I can't say that I know in detail everything that's happening at the high school, but in talking with district leaders, it sounds like a lot of that has not yet been implemented. And maybe Superintendent Stanton can say more about that.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last statement.
Oh, I was just saying maybe Superintendent Stanton can say more about that.
Yes?
Yeah.
Particularly at the Southbridge Middle High School, one of the things that we are working toward is tiered intervention. That model is currently up and functional for both behavior and academics at the elementary level. Although it is understaffed and under-resourced, the struggle is still with the middle school, high school, getting tiered instruction in a meaningful way implemented. And then the next step for the entire district is to analyze the interventions that are being used both for behavior and academics to see what's working with our students and make adjustments as needed.
Okay, thank you. Should I continue?
Yep, please.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm always a little bit leery of when you compare data like this is you're comparing this year to last year.
Correct.
This is basically, it can be depending on a variety of different circumstances. And so, and one of the things that we became aware of not too long ago through Superintendent Stanton is we've had a large influx of students with disabilities into the middle high school this year, just that came in from out-of-district placements. And so I think it's maybe more of a comment than a question. So I don't know that it's really fair to be comparing this year's 10th graders with last year's 10th graders. And so are there plans, and I think I've asked this question a lot, and I don't seem to be seeing any kind of analysis of this, is there a way that we can say, okay, what's last year's 9th graders and how are they comparing as 10th graders this year? Are you looking at that in any kind of way? or?
That's certainly an analysis that we could conduct. I mean, we use the data that the district provides, and frankly, we report on the benchmarks that are in the district's accelerated improvement plan, and so certainly there's flexibility in terms of how, I mean, we think it's really important to look at these indicators, but how those are measured in terms of measuring it by cohort, quarter to quarter, I mean, there's definitely some flexibility.
Okay.
So we could certainly, as the district is looking to develop their plan for next year, that's certainly something we could
Okay,
discuss.
so I guess that would be my follow-up. Would you recommend that that would be in our next year's AIP? that would be a way we should start analyzing the data, looking at how individual students are tracking compared to their previous performance. Are they improving or not? Because you did say that you saw some improvements between quarter one and quarter two of this year.
Yes.
But it seems to be overshadowed by we're really, really bad compared to last year. And so it seems that, excuse me, it seems to me like there may be some indication that we're making some improvements with the students this year as time is marching through this year, and, you know, as opposed to comparing it to last year.
Yep.
Okay, that's more of a comment, I realize.
So if I may, I think it's important to identify, I mean, there's multiple ways we can analyze the data, right? We could look at from year to year, cohort to cohort from one year to the next, so 9th to 10th grade, or you can look at from quarter to quarter, right? It's important to have a baseline so you can know relative to what, so that you know that the numbers, or to give some context to them. When we're developing the AIP for next year, I think it's certainly things we can consider. It is incumbent upon the district to provide that data to us. So if that's the way we go, then we're going to have to make sure the district has the capability to provide that data to us, because the interim assessment data is not something that we have at the department, for example, and the real-time sort of data on suspensions and tardies and things like that aren't something that we collect on a regular basis at the department, especially at the interim assessment level. So it's just, I remember the same variation of the question the last time we were here, and as we go on to developing next year's AIP, I think it's something to take in consideration about how we're going to measure. But I do think that there's value in all three of those ways, because especially, you know, we know that in a lot of districts that even from, if you look at a cohort of 9th graders to the 10th grade, that population changes from year to year also, right? So you're going to have that transience affects even the cohort also.
Yeah, you could, I mean, I would imagine, people that are in the district know the data or know the students or whatever, you could correct for those kinds of anomalies, I would imagine. So I guess my maybe point or comment, maybe more than a question, is that I think we need to be analyzing the data a little more thoroughly in order to make better informed decisions in terms of figuring out where are the roots of the problems. And in a lot of this, at least currently, the way I'm looking at it, I'm not seeing a capability of doing that. Yeah, we do have challenges with the LL. We do have special challenges with students with disabilities. We realize that. We also have challenges, I think, in the other areas as well. But the more we can dissect, you know, more of the root causes of it, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yep. No, I have point taken, and we can move to that as we develop next year's AIP.
Right. And I guess, if I may continue, an area of concern, I think, for all of us is the issue of truancy, tardies, suspensions, just all of this kind of stuff. Where I struggle with it is that if you have students that are presenting constant behavior problems, if you're not doing some kind of progressive disciplinary action with them, you're encouraging their poor behavior. And so it seems like we're being held to a standard that says, well, you have increases in suspensions, increases in all of these kinds of these categories. Well, we could fudge the numbers by just not suspending them.
Sure.
But then how is that, I mean, that's going to have a negative impact. So maybe I'm looking for a little bit of advice and guidance as to what you think this district should be doing to deal with those kinds of issues in order to, one, have these, I don't use the right word, you know, bad actors, right? Not disrupting the entire educational process, but at the same time trying to figure out ways to get them into a situation where they are willing to learn and can learn. And so this is something, the Ombudsman program didn't work for us last year. We have plans for next year, my understanding is. But any light you could shed on that would be helpful. So
as you may know, effective July 1, 2014, Chapter 222, the new discipline law came into effect in the Commonwealth. And the whole goal of the discipline law is to make sure that there is not an over-reliance on suspension as a disciplinary tool, and that it is to find multiple pathways to allow students to still receive educational services instead of an all-out suspension, right? It's the entire point of the law, and what we'd like to see is the district, and this is again something that can be developed over time, is to be able to make sure that there are multiple options at the hands of both the building level, at the district level, to be able to ensure that students have opportunities to receive services as opposed to just an outright suspension, although at times that's going to be necessary. I mean, we're acknowledging that, but the idea is to make sure that there's not an over-reliance on it. And I would characterize the numbers that we're seeing here in terms of suspensions as high, right? You know, and that's something that we can make sure that we're working towards as a real point of emphasis moving forward.
To follow up to that, are you looking at the details as to the reasons for the suspensions?
That was exactly what I was going to say. We were talking in the previous matter about looking at it carefully. I think the school and the district needs to take a very careful look at what kind of behaviors have been leading to suspensions. And the thing we haven't been talking about is the increase in failures, which is a very serious matter. And you know, what is contributing to that? And I think it's time to stand back and have a hard look at what's going on.
Okay. And so would your recommendation be in terms of the disciplinary, is that something that should be really dealt with at the school committee level, or do you think that should be more or less managed at the building level?
Speaking as a building principal, I think that's where it starts. I was a high school principal. And you need support from the district, but you need to have control of your building.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm just talking about in terms of the policies that would lead to suspension. For example, at what point do you allow students to, you know, swear at, hit, whatever, threaten teachers and not suspend them? You know, I mean, these are the kinds of things that, you know,
well,
we hear
and one
all
of the
the time.
things that's in the report is the suggestion that all your policies regarding those things be reviewed.
Okay. Okay. And that's building level, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to turn here, and then I'll rotate.
I'm done.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we need to get clear. When the community hears, I'm from the state and I'm here to help you, they simply don't believe it. There's some cynicism greatly in this community. We are talking about how to get out of level 3. And that's level 4 to another level. What I think we need to hear, and you know, everyone I would hope read about Holyoke today. Holyoke has been put under receivership. And I think it would be beneficial for the town to hear how a school district goes in that direction. Are we on, you have a district review in October. The district review, if I may, the district review is what decided the Commissioner of Education, he based his view on that, to put the Holyoke schools under receivership. So if we have years of underfunding, if we have this constant turnaround, how are we not paralleling Holyoke?
Okay, so there was a lot in that question. Let me try to address it. I have spent the last 2 days between Holyoke and Fitchburg State this morning, and been deeply involved in the Holyoke process. So let me cover a couple things there, and I want to be absolutely clear about a couple of things. So receivership, and to use the Commissioner's words, is not to be taken lightly. It is an absolute last resort. Okay. There has been no discussion of receivership with the school district of Southbridge. So I want to be absolutely clear about that at this time. As far as the district review did not put Holyoke into receivership. And so I want to be clear, because everybody that I come in and say we're going to review now is wondering what the next step is. And it is a required component of the receivership process. You have to be reviewed within 1 year of being put into receivership, but it is a very small component, and the Commissioner has been clear about the fact that specific to Holyoke, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Holyoke, but specific to Holyoke, we're talking about a 10-year involvement, which has gone into his decision-making process, not just a district review that occurred in January. So, I just want to be clear about that. We are committed to continuing to work with Southbridge to come up with an AIP that puts Southbridge on the path to exiting level 4. Okay, that's what the school committee wants, I hope, and that's what we want also. That's what our commitment is. We are not thinking about it in the other direction at this time. So, I don't even want to, make it seem like that's even a possibility or under discussion right now. We are committed to moving forward with the AIP process, and we think that, especially with the leadership of Superintendent Stanton, that we've seen in the commitment to the principles of the AIP, that we think that given that consistent approach, this district can head in that right direction.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Holyoke was first designated as an underperforming district in 2003.
Yep.
Southbridge in 2005. It's not really that,
Sure.
I think that there is some reason to be concerned. You say there is not, but can we learn? Can we be told how a district goes to level 5?
So, again, a district is placed in level 5 only by a vote of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Okay, that is the only way you can be a level 5 district. Even our districts that have level 5 schools are considered to be level 4 districts, right? So New Bedford, for example, with a level 5 school is only a level 4 district. The only way you can end up as a level 5 district is through a vote of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education.
We don't even have a level 4 school.
Correct.
Our school's a level 3.
Correct. So you are in a level 4 as a result of board action back in 2005 being declared underperform. And what we want to do is use the AIP process and not, and think about, again, moving up the level scale into level 3, using that AIP process over a consistent amount of time to be able to move the district out of level 4. That is what our aim is.
Is there no consideration for the funding that it takes to do that?
I appreciate that question. Obviously, we have heard a lot about, in Holyoke, we heard a lot about funding, and we hear about it wherever we go. We are sensitive to it, obviously, but we think that with the leadership that's in place, both at the school district level and the resources that we can provide to you in terms of assistance, we think that we can put the district on a path to move out of level 4.
Madam Chair, if I may just one more thing.
Okay, thank you.
No, but it is not the school committee. It is not the superintendent. It is nothing in the schools that sets the budget for the schools. We can do all of this, everything. And if the town does not fund the schools to an appropriate level, we cannot progress.
So I respect that, sir. And, there is a required net school spending, and and I don't want to get into details, all the weeds of the net school spending formula, but there is a required net school spending. Again, all I would say is that we are committed to working with the district within the resources that are available to putting the district on a path to move out of level 4.
Thank you.
Thank you. On this side, any questions about the AIP? On this side? Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you are going to regret saying that you had, we all had your full attention for the entire evening because, as I'm sure you remember, I'm full of questions. The first question I have is regarding strategic objective number 1 and how we are defining curricula. And I know that there are several different ways to define that, but can you specifically speak to how in this AIP we're defining curricula? Is it learning objectives, strategies?
Well, what the state has is a listing of the elements that go into a solid curriculum. And they include objectives, they include resources, they include assessments, they include lesson plans, units. It's a whole array of things that go into a really strong curriculum. And it's a major undertaking to have something really solid, but it's how you are sure that your students are being taught what they need to be taught.
And based on the objective, which I'll read for the public, to develop, refine, and implement curricula for all K-12 core subjects and instructional practices aligned to the Common Core and WIDA standards. At this time, do we have a strong curriculum that we are delivering to our students, K through 12?
I would say you're in the process of developing a strong curriculum, but you're not there yet.
So we're still in the process of developing it. So
Yes.
clearly, if we're developing it, we are not delivering it.
You are in some areas delivering it, but you are in some areas still developing it.
Thank you. Within that strategic objective number 1, it said that the district has learned that learning walks are not effective ways to measure this particular benchmark. What are the most effective ways to measure that?
I honestly think that's a decision to be made by the school district, because I work in other school districts where we do use learning walks as a measure, but Southbridge has not found that to be a useful measure. So I think that's a local decision.
Okay. And just kind of reading through all of this and hearing kind of where we are regarding curriculum, I think having one at every level would be the first step. Like, I don't think we've gotten past developing through K through 12. I mean, we might be making progress and it might be at some levels, but I think clearly that needs to be a focus. You can't.
And we understand it will be in the summer.
Well, and I guess my question would be, if you were to do a learning walk and you didn't have a tool in place, how could you determine how that tool is working if it's not present?
In order to make the learning walk useful, you do need to have a tool in place. And Southbridge began the year with a tool called the Southbridge Standard, and eventually decided that that in particular was not working for them. I think this means Southbridge needs a tool, but is not going to use the one that they started the year with. And my understanding is that the district has already had somebody in to talk about an alternative learning walk model, and that is pretty much decided on is where you're going next year. Am I correct? Yeah.
Can Ms. Stanton just say?
So curricula was developed 2 years ago in math and implemented and being revised. Reading, English language arts was developed this past summer with the adoption of the Reach for Reading in K through 5. That is going to be revised this summer, and the work is to ensure that units are developed that don't just follow Reach for Reading, but actually the Common Core standards, and also so that we have common formative assessments that teachers are using together and then collecting student information and talking about the actual skills that students need. Science is on board right now, being written, and that will be implemented next year. With the tough budget times that we're under, resources are going to be difficult, I think, to ensure that we have all the texts that need to go into that curriculum. And then social studies will be the year after. I think there's two questions here. One is, are we developing effective curricula? Yes, I would say that yes, we are developing effective curricula. What we found with learning walks is that we were collecting data that was compliant. So are we seeing objectives in the classroom? Yes. What we want to start to develop is a strategy that provides feedback to schools and teachers around the instruction that's happening that's linked to the student learning. Not just we're walking through the buildings and we're giving feedback and we're counting things, but actually have a learning walk protocol that addresses exactly what you're talking about, which is this is where they're supposed to be in the curriculum, this is the lesson that we're observing, and is the lesson impactful for students? And so that's the shift in the learning walk protocol that we'd like to see. That's what we'll be training with DSAC over the next 2 months, and we'll be implementing hopefully a pilot in June so that we have some feedback as we rewrite the AIP for the fall and implement a different learning walk protocol.
So, would you say that in ELA and math, we have curricula that is being distributed horizontally as well as vertically? It's built upon at this time?
So at this time, I would say that we do have horizontal. The idea to allow staff the time in professional development to look vertically at curriculum is the next step that we need to take.
So I guess that builds on my, I had read that one of the things that we're looking at is common planning time. With that, the evidence of common planning time, are you looking at changing how the evidence is collected, or are you looking at changing having common planning time for those horizontal teams?
So for the horizontal teams, I think it's providing effective professional development for teams to be able to use that common planning time effectively, so that we are looking regularly at how we are implementing the curriculum, so that we are addressing students as they move through. We're using assessments to do and drive that work. Vertically, we do need to start taking the time to bring multiple grade levels of teachers together, particularly at the transition grades of 5 to 6 and 8 to 9. Those are critical as students move between the schools. And so we were just doing a school visit today at Eastford Road, and one of the things that Assistant Superintendent Mr. Latoya and I talked about was the fact that we need to get the first grade teachers to kindergarten so they can understand the changes that have happened in kindergarten, so they can understand how the students are being prepared, because the rigor in kindergarten has risen. We have kindergarten readers, they're working in small groups, they're working independently, and until first grade teachers or the next year teacher sees that in action, I think that they are maybe under an assumption that the students can't do, and that if we have these vertical alignments happening, then the rigor across the board will increase.
If I could just add one thing about common planning time, it can be very useful for a review of data and for establishing what the students' needs are and pulling together groups to address those needs.
Thank you. And then on page 2, paragraph 3, it talks about as described in prior AIP reports, they focused on identifying the special needs of ELL and students with disabilities. Can someone share with me what we have identified as the specific needs other than requiring tiered intervention?
Yeah.
I apologize, I lost you where you were referencing.
Page 2?
Yep.
Chapter 3?
One of the things that
What are
I
those
recall most
specific
strongly with ELL students was identification. And it was a serious need at the beginning of the year. Someone was hired specifically with responsibility for ELL, and the first thing she did, and it was an important thing, was identify who the students were who needed ELL support and what levels they were at.
Can you repeat your question?
What are the specific needs
Okay.
of ELL students and students with disabilities that have been identified that we are making plans to address?
So the specific needs of ELL and special education students in two groups. So thank you, Mrs. Williams. The ELL students, we have correctly identified them according to level, and currently we are writing curricula specific to the ELL students. So we have also ensured that access testing was appropriately given to students, and the analysis of the results of that will begin to occur so we can identify specific skill needs for students. We've also done professional development with SEI strategies, particularly around vocabulary. We are looking and monitoring for vocabulary and SEI strategies in classrooms when we're doing school visits and learning walks. Vocabulary development for SEI students is critical to their development. In addition, for the special education students, Ms. Culligan has done a root cause analysis with her staff and has developed a professional development plan to be implemented over the summer. One of the things we have noticed is the trauma as a root cause for many of the issues that our students are facing, and that's not specific to special education, but providing professional development and trauma-sensitive classrooms for students so that they can engage and be motivated and stay on track. I think that we do a lot of work around developing staff, but specific to your point, we need to start looking at the student outcomes. That's our goal of the AIP, is to have the data flow more directly to grade levels so that they can address specific student needs, but also to flow up to the district level so that, to Dr. Page's point, we are doing a better analysis of what the needs are so that we can do an even better job of allocating to budget.
Thank you. I know that I bring this up every time we meet, so I'm going to bring it up again. ANET data that is forwarded onto the state, if that could be given to us, that would be helpful information. Because reading some of the things regarding Charlton Street School and West Street School and their numbers and outperforming, it doesn't give any, there's no specificity, but to be able to have that, if it's already being prepared and sent forward to DESE, that would be helpful information, I think, for all of us to have. Those of us that want to read it can, those of us that don't have to. But I would, again, request that that be forwarded on to us when it's sent to the state. Regarding alignment to ANET, I know personally that at an ANET test a year ago, I was told, oh, don't worry, he knows everything he needs to know. We just didn't cover that. And that was something that I brought up at that time as well. If we are using ANET as our standards, but we're going to test, then we need to have that aligned. If ANET isn't the tool that we're using Common Core, and Common Core isn't aligned to ANET, then I think we need to reevaluate what tool we use, and I think everyone is very clear that I'm not a big fan of ANET because comparing us to the worst of the worst to make our numbers whatever they are, I think our kids deserve better, and we should set a higher bar and higher expectations for that. I wanted to...
So just on that point, my understanding is that Southbridge will be switching off of ANET.
Yes.
Correct.
That is a good thing, in my opinion. We'll see what the next
Right.
tool is and
And
what
just
my
to be-
opinion of that is at any given time.
And just to be clear, the choice of interim assessment is that of the district and not required by the state.
I understand. Thank you. I wanted to touch upon the failure rate. I think we've kind of glanced over that failure rate. And I've said it before at other meetings. I don't know that you all were present, but I think the most concerning data for me is not necessarily how kids do on ANET, because if we're not, our curriculum maps aren't aligned with ANET or or whatever tool we're using. My bigger concern was when we have our own quarterly assessments that we've established and how students do on them. If it's been generated within the district, this is what we have said, this is our expectation that students will be able to do X, Y, and Z by said period of time and will be tested at that point, and then aren't able to meet that. I think that that is a more alarming numbers, and I wanted to just share some of that because the community doesn't have that. Second quarter ELA assessments, grade 9 was 29% proficient, grade 10, 40%, grade 11, 4%. And I think what is more alarming to me is that after reteach, so after those key indicators where kids weren't getting it, were retaught and had some significant intervention on those key factors, that grade 9 and 10 proficiency decreased. Can you explain to me how that is even possible?
I don't think I can. The data, often we look at the data to be able to establish trends and to be able to give some context to what's happening in the schools. The data that came back were in some cases surprising that you're noting, but the purpose of it is mainly to provide context and then dig deeper to get answers to questions like this, right? So it's a starting point for a discussion, not necessarily an answer to the question. So that's what we hope that the data will do, but we're just providing the data as a point of context for you as a progress report.
I think sad is a gross understatement of that. And math, I think, was a little bit more encouraging. Algebra 1, 19.8% proficient. Geometry, yay, geometry, 58.5% proficient. Algebra 2, 25.7% proficient. After reteaching, rates increased in all 3 courses. So I think that that's encouraging, although 19.8, 58.5, and 25.7 aren't encouraging numbers. The fact that when areas that kids had difficulty with were retaught and then they did better is a little bit encouraging for me. And I wanted to just touch upon what I think we've talked about a great deal is the increase in suspensions and tardies and all of that. I think the numbers compared to last year are more difficult to understand and kind of wrap my brain around, given that we do have an ombudsman program, and 23 students who may have been termed last year bad actors have been removed from the student population and put somewhere else. They might just not have been conventional learners, they needed credit recovery, whatever it was. When Ms. Brannigan from Ombudsman came, I asked, based on this, if this is the model, would you have anticipated that there would be less suspensions? She said, absolutely, that would be our indicator. So I don't think taking out suspending or whatever 23 bad actors has proven, putting them somewhere else has proven not to have any impact on our current suspension rates versus last year at this time. I also think we talked about policies, and we've written some good policies, and our policies are only as good as the implementation.
Right.
We can't implement them, we can write them. It is incumbent upon others to implement those policies.
Right.
So we can write policies till we're blue in the face, and that doesn't do anything unless those policies are implemented with fidelity.
Absolutely.
And to that point, I don't know that I would go to a school if I was told that I should just drop out, that I wasn't going to amount to anything, that I was a waste of space and a waste of time, and that I felt and was told that I was hated and coming to work to teach me was like going to jail on a daily basis. I think I would stay home. And I am horrified and disgusted that any student, that we as a community entrust into the care of adults could think to speak of our children in a manner like that. They are people, and they deserve to be treated as people with respect and with expectations. So we can say it's an abomination that they swear, but you know what? If people thought so ill of me for coming to school and attempting to get an education, that they would speak to me like that, I might swear at them as well. I had one other point. I believe that there's a typo in here, as there are not 2,300 families at the middle high school.
I'm not sure where you're referring to, but if there is, then that's our apologies, and we'll make sure that gets fixed.
Yeah, that's not even close. There was something else that I had wanted to say, but at this moment, due to my extraordinarily high blood pressure, it escapes me. It might come back later.
And Member Quinney, I believe that you're correct, and we apologize for that, and we'll make sure that gets fixed.
Thank you.
I see the typo now. Is that right? Is it a typo?
You set for now, Erin?
Yeah, for now, thank you. If it comes
On
back.
this side, is there anybody who would like to speak?
It might.
Student.
Okay. We'll see if it gets fixed.
I think that
There are not 2,300 students.
Okay, well, did Kara want to talk? Can I ask her to speak first?
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, through you to everybody, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
My first question to you, Rob, is I believe the last time you were here and talked about the district review, once the review itself is complete, the turnaround time for the district of receiving your report, I think, was thrown out maybe February. Is that still the timeline of when we would actually receive the final report of your findings?
Right. So I'm doing some quick math in my head. What I have tried to adhere to this year, with 106 inches of snow notwithstanding, is roughly a 12-week turnaround time.
Okay.
From the time that we're on the ground. So that's, if that works out,
what's
with
the
some
end of
holidays there.
January?
So
Okay.
something like that. I think we are. I think we're becoming much more efficient in the delivery of our reports, and I think that there's even, we are trying to be as efficient as possible. The idea is to get the report in your hands as quickly as possible to be able to, so they can be helpful to you. If I can just speak for a moment about the process, just so you understand what takes 12 weeks. There is a on-site time. There is a time of writing for the team, generally a couple of weeks. There's a time of editing for my staff that then goes back to the review team for checking on the edits. But most importantly, there's a 2 to 3 week time frame that we give the district to fact check the report and to make sure that they are in agreement with all of what's from a factual perspective about what it says in the report. We don't want to publish anything that is absolutely incorrect. We publish opinions and assertions perhaps, but in terms of facts, we want to make sure the district has the time to look at it and to make sure. So generally it ends up at about a 12-week timeline. It's just, but that's a market improvement of where we've been, but we're trying to be as efficient as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the presentation. I guess my first question might be for Ms. Williams. On page 2, there are some bullets near the bottom of the page that talk specifically to ANET test results at Charlton Street and West Street School. Right. And like the first 2 bullets are very specific to grades 3 and 4, but there's no mention of grade 5. And as we move down, there may be a mention of grade 3 and 5, but no mention of grade 4. So I was just curious as to why some grades may have been left out.
What I was referring to was the standard we were using. So when students outperformed the network average, I noted them.
Okay.
So if they're not there, they didn't.
Okay.
Again, it's providing highlights or points of emphasis.
I didn't know if it meant just what you said, or if they were not included as the part of the data analysis.
And I think, as your colleague suggested, perhaps it'll be beneficial for you to have the full data set moving forward. When we report to you on progress, so you have all the data in front of you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question that I wanted a little bit of elaboration on, if you will, is there was both Ms. Rashane and the report stated that one of the areas of concerns that our elementary principals have is the segregation of our low students and our high student levels, and that is one of your recommendations of moving forward to fix that. So I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that. I think I know, but I just want a little bit more information of how that works.
I can tell you how I came upon this. I did a walkthrough at one of the elementary schools with the principal, and we were in classrooms, say a third grade, right across from one another, but the tenor in the classroom varied very widely. It was in one classroom, industrious students, in another, students more distracted. Definitely could feel the difference in both rooms. And I talked to the principal about that at that time. And I thought that was just a single instance of it. But at the last highlights meeting, when principals were talking about A-net results, they were really deploring the fact that given the separation of the students into two separate groups, the results were not good. And when you have heterogeneous grouping, and you have models in both classrooms, and you know what the standard is for learning and for behavior, it makes quite a difference in the results that you get. So at that meeting, I questioned whether it was just in place at one school and was told, no, it's at both elementary schools. And my understanding was that it's pressure from the community to do that.
Okay, so my question is, if we have a classroom with 20 high achievers, and across the hall are 20 that not so much, if we have 4 grade level classrooms, and we're going to take this one classroom of 20 high achievers and take 5, say, from each, take 5 and put them in classroom A, 5 in classroom B, 5 in classroom C, 5 in classroom D. I don't understand how those 5 children can have such an extraordinary effect on the other 15 low achievers. How does that happen?
I think, I can be corrected here, but I have a feeling you're talking about 2 grade 3s or 2 grade 4s. Have I got that correct?
No.
4? Are there 4?
There's 4.
Okay.
And I understand that there's one classroom set aside with high achievers, and rightly so. I don't want to appear biased, but I am, because I can tell you that I have a 9-year-old daughter who was in one of those classrooms and is thriving and doing very well. And I understand the situation that our classrooms are in, but I don't understand why the burden of my 9-year-old, it falls on her now to set the standard, set the role model, and teach 15 other kids how to straighten up and do their classwork. I don't see how that's possible. And it isn't fair to the high achievers, because what's going to happen to them? We're catering to a group that obviously needs our support, absolutely no doubt, but to take a specific group of kids who, thank God, we at least have those kids, or what would our scores look like? How is that beneficial to those group of kids? I have a problem with that. And perhaps I'm just venting, but it is an area of concern, and I know that there's talk of changing this classroom scenario, and I don't understand how that benefits either group. So I'm just looking for clarification on that.
So if I may, in a traditional classroom, maybe not even more than 10 years ago, where students were given direct instruction by the teacher standing in the front of the room, and the kids were all in rows. To your point, yes, it would be a burden to your 9-year-old to provide the model, if you will. In our classrooms now, the way classrooms run, where groups of students work together in centers at the elementary level, where the teacher spends time at home designing specific lessons for small groups of students in her classroom, specific to the needs of students. You can have 5 students who are high achieving who receive that direct instruction from the teacher, while a paraprofessional or educational assistant is supporting other students, or they're doing other center work. So To your point, when we were in school, it would be a challenge. The way classes are designed and the way we differentiate for students now, less of a challenge. I also think that if we use intervention blocks regularly, every day, then students who are high-achieving students can receive the extended learning they need every day for a portion of the day specific to their learning needs. One of the main reasons we're moving to MAP is so that we can understand and know for sure that each and every one of our students is showing growth. ANET does not allow us to do that. MAP will. And so we can say our highest achieving students are not just proficient, because proficient's not enough. We want to ensure that each and every one of our students are growing to their potential, and that's what the assessment will allow us to do. So I think if you look at overall how we organize our classrooms, I see the heterogeneous grouping not as a way for our high-achieving students to provide support, but as cultures of classrooms to develop commitment to learning together.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that it?
No, but that's it for that. Thank you very much. The other question that I had was, Mrs. Quinney had mentioned it earlier about the reteaching technique after an ANET assessment, and then finding on some occasions that the reassessment has in fact decreased. If that, you probably don't have an answer, but I'm just looking more for process. Is there a process in place that we can go back to determine what was the root cause as to why there was that deficiency the second time around? Where is the gap or the broke in the chain, if you will, as to, okay, we missed the boat the first time and now we've missed it again the second time, even greater than the first? Who looks at that and determines where people went wrong, whether it is a student or on the part of the teacher? Is that process being done after this is determined?
I think it's a combination. I think the students need to look at it. I think the teachers need to look at it. And I think the building, where you're moving toward a time when you will have more assessment data, and you'll be able to see in more than one assessment how your students, whether they're growing. It's a matter, when we're talking about the way you divide your classrooms, you're talking about growth, and you're talking about growth for all students. And I think it's a combined effort.
Okay, I agree. The other question, a bunch of questions that I have is on page 4, just for your reference. I'm going to put on my old lady glasses because there's so many numbers. I want to make sure I get them right. The first paragraph, the end of the first paragraph, where we're talking about, and this is just clarification so that I understand the data. There are percentages and numbers given to the number of courses failed by grade level. And I didn't know what that meant. Number of courses failed, what's the definition of that? That's step 1.
That's right. So I think this is in direct response to the last time we were here, when you asked us about the difference between the number of courses failed and the number of students that failed those courses.
Right. So I'm still a little confused about that.
Right. So what we've done is, in the paragraph in the upper paragraph, what we've done is talk about the number of courses that are failed and the change that occurred in the number of courses. And then in the line below that, we've talked about the number of students that represent the failing of those courses. So we tried to provide both data points to you this time as opposed to last time when we weren't as clear.
Okay.
So just to punctuate that, so in grade 8, for example, there were 177 courses failed, representing 81 students.
So you could have a student that failed multiple courses of their day.
Right, that's why we've given you both sides of the equation.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I think, all right, that makes better sense. I understand that. Okay, thank you very much. I guess I need the same clarification on the number of suspension versus the number of suspension days. What is the difference between those two points of data?
Right, so the number of suspensions is there to show the prevalence of the use of suspension, and the number of days is there to show the duration, right? So whether we're talking about a lot of long-term suspensions or we're talking about a high number of 1 or 2 day suspensions.
So it's not specific to how many students were suspended. You could have a student suspended multiple times that would factor into either one of those rates, I should say.
That's correct, and in an effort to always improve these progress reports, we can make sure that the next time, as we did with the course failures, that we add in the number of students that this represented in addition to both the prevalence and the duration of the suspensions.
Okay, all right, that's fine, thank you very much. I'm making my way down the page, just underneath the suspension information, talking about the number of courses that failed across the grades. The way that the data is presented for both grades 9, 10, and 12, it shows what the change has been from 2013, 2014 to the current school year. So I'm wondering, are those grade 9 kids, is that a different cohort, or are we still looking at the same cohort of students, even though it's 2 different school years?
So it is 2 different school years, students in grade 9 in 13-14 and students in grade 9 in 14-15. It is different students. Well, yeah, presumably, except for the ones that were retained, but that's correct. So it's looking at grade 9.
Grade 9 as a whole, but that whole is comprised of 2 different groups to show where the change was. Not the same group of students.
Correct.
Because those grade 9 students at the beginning are now sophomores.
Right. And to that point, we can talk about different ways to look at the data. I actually think in terms of grade 9 course failures, that is a good way to look at the data. We know that grade 9, passing all your courses in grade 9 is a huge indicator for success moving forward. So for this particular data point, I think it is useful to look at grade 9 to grade 9 one year to the next.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I believe that is all that I had. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Condon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More of a comment in regards to the pressure from the community to keep those classrooms for the higher achieving students. There is pressure from the community because we are a level 4 district. And I don't have the school choice numbers in front of me, but people school choice their kids in this district from first grade on. And I think our numbers are significantly high. So there is pressure from the community to teach the children who are higher achieving. And until we as a district get it right, I think the only thing keeping some of those children in this district who are scoring those advanced scores is those higher level classes. And until we get it right, to be able to put those children in separate classes and have them not have students who are disruptive so they can learn, I think is a concern for a lot of parents. So I think there's a lot of pressure from the community, but if we don't have some of those classes, I think we're going to see our school choice numbers go up.
I mean, and I appreciate the comment. My response to that would be, there are certainly differing opinions and different ways to look at it. We're offering the opinion that we believe that the heterogeneous classroom would be an effective model, but understanding the point of view that you're offering. But it was just our opinion and the opinion of looking at someone that's actually, when Ms. Williams entered the classrooms and delivered her report to us, our opinion was to move forward with the heterogeneous classrooms.
Are you done, Mrs. Condon?
Can I follow up to that?
On that, well, Mr. Abrahamson wanted to speak. Do you defer to him? Okay. Dr. Page?
I guess on that.
Yeah, it was on that subject too.
If you have these separate classes, teachers are also evaluated. So every teacher would want a top group. It's as simple as that. I mean, because it's easier to teach a top group. I don't think that's complicated. The other thing is you mentioned the work of Superintendent Stanton.
Yes.
Was that part of your report, or was that ancillary to your report?
And I appreciate that, and that is not necessarily specifically noted here. That is through my interaction with my staff and gaining their opinion as part of the process, both on the plan monitor side and on the plan manager side.
You may not know that Superintendent Stanton's contract ends June 30th. There's a great deal of pressure coming from, well, the town side, but also on this side, for a search for a superintendent. How would you evaluate that? How would that affect our performance?
So I'm not going to comment on that, and please let me make sure that my comment was clear. My comment on Superintendent Stanton was about her participation with us in this AIP process. I was not attempting to wade into the superintendent search question. I was commenting on her participation and her work with us through our interactions with both my staff, the plan monitor, and that was merely the comment that I was making. So if it came across in any other way, then I offer my apologies.
I appreciate your sliding out of that political dilemma. Thank you.
Dr. Page.
So just to back to the point of the whole sort of separation of classes and all of that kind of stuff, I guess what I would like to see is, if this is done, a good sort of, or my suggestion, I guess, would be, is a good historical sort of benchmark, or a good benchmark of where these specific students are now in terms of how they're achieving, high achieving, proficient, advanced, whatever, in the various subjects. Then when you change that next year, to make sure that those students that we've now taken from whatever you want to, however you want to categorize it, are still continuing to advance as they would have in the traditional setting. I would hate to see a situation where we try and solve one problem by creating another one, in the sense of that they don't do as well as they would have otherwise. So that would be my very strong suggestion. Treating it like an experiment, isolate the variables, and then have a good objective way to analyze the data at the end of the day to know whether or not the change is effective, is truly effective.
Not just the
Absolutely. It needs to, a lot of the things need to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remembered. I wanted to talk about rigor, and that was...
I'm sorry, about what?
Rigor.
Oh, rigor. Yeah.
Rigor was discussed at several points throughout this report, and it was cited as, we've heard reports before regarding how students are doing in different buildings, and it's because there's an increased failure rate because the rigor is higher. And my thought had been, as is indicated here, that if rigor increases and students aren't able to rise to the level to meet that rigor, that we need to put in place supports.
That goes right back to the support question.
Right, in order to get...
You can't just raise the standards. You have to enable the students to meet the standards.
Right, provide the tools in order to meet those standards. To say that, well, of course we have an increased failure rate, we've increased rigor, it's harder now, and not providing the support that students need in order to attain higher levels of educational success and the content that we're distributing to them is a disservice.
We agree.
And if I could just add one thing to that.
Yep.
One of the things that will come out of the district review report is a fair amount of data that result from the classroom observations. Mm-hmm. And one of the areas that we look at, there are currently, although we might be revising, there are currently 24 areas, I believe, in the classroom observation area, and one of them is rigor. You'll have a sample and you'll have some independent data to look at what the team thinks about the rigor in the classrooms that they observe.
Excellent. And building on that, regarding rigor, if you had a rigorous classroom at the high school level, how much homework would you anticipate for a student? For that independent learning, independent thinking, problem solving, figuring things out, learning to be resourceful? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
I'm going to be completely honest with you and say I don't know the answer to that question.
Would you say that there should be homework?
One would presume, but again, I don't know. I haven't. My children haven't gotten there yet. They're quite a long ways away. So I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, the one thing I like to offer answers when I don't know or solutions when I don't know the answers is to be able to look at some research for you, if that would be helpful. But it's not something I could answer at this moment.
Well, and what I would refer to would be the quality of what students are asked to do, rather than the quantity of time it takes to do it.
I would wholly concur. I think one of the things that we had in place that we said that wasn't being utilized in the footnote was after-school academic support. And when I have asked students, you know, CAM and the NHS has after-school homework help, why aren't you going? And they said, what are we going to bring? We don't know what we don't know, and we don't get any work to have somebody help us with what we don't know. So I think that goes to that rigor in looking at what our expectations are. And if we have expectations, that they're elevated on all levels. It's not just what we're presenting and you're not passing, but what we're presenting, what we're giving you opportunities to learn, what we're giving you opportunities to be resourceful and learn tools to access resources available to support that ongoing lifelong learning. And I think that's one of the pieces that I would like to see addressed moving forward. And my last question for you all is, have you considered renaming the AIP as it is an accelerated improvement plan? And I feel like we're not improving, and we're certainly not accelerated in our improving. Has there been any thought regarding what we could potentially call this plan?
Yeah, that's mine, thanks. So I appreciate that. The flat answer to the question is no. I have not considered renaming it. It is a plan for accelerated improvement. We hope to see the results achieved by it, but it is a plan for accelerated improvement, and the plan, I don't have any intention right now to change the name right now.
I would like to see some acceleration in our improvements.
And we would agree with that. And that's the, it's clear, and let me be clear. I really appreciate the questions, the tough ones, and all the questions that are being asked here tonight. They're critically important. And what it tells me is not only that we need to continue finishing out this year, but we need to make sure that we pay great detail to the development of the plan over the summer for next year. And your feedback will help us in that process. And I'll make sure that our staff keeps all of these things in mind when we're working through that development process with the district for next year. It's one that we go through with the few districts that are on AIPs, and we're going to make sure that we develop the strongest plan possible.
Thank you. I'm good.
Okay. So it's my turn. So one of the both advantages and disadvantages of going last is that some of the questions have been asked and answered. I think you can universally sense some frustration up here, frustration with data, frustration with lack of data, frustration with certainly the numbers as presented. We're struggling here. I hesitate to use my own children as an example for anything, because that's very personal. I will a little later on, but I just have a few questions here. Uniformity. When I look and see that we need to develop curricula, how come we cannot, if another district is doing it right, just adopt that curricula? I have been, as a parent in this district, my children were in this district the year this district was declared underperforming. Every single year we're talking about developing curricula. My 10 years have gone by and we don't have curricula for my children. Or if we do have curricula, I can assure you that in many cases it's not being implemented. I don't understand why the state doesn't have some sort of template for underperforming districts, kind of a blueprint or a plan to get us where we need to be, because the players are constantly changing here. This is hard for me to say publicly, but I don't have much faith that the team that's assembled this year will be here next year, because every year it's been different. That is a huge concern to me. You know, we are in a conundrum as a community because we keep hearing we need to add additional resources, and we do. We need to add additional resources not only for the, you know, the ELL population and the students with disabilities population, but for all students. We need resources. But yet that's a political hot potato we're not supposed to talk about. And when we ask for the resources, or not even ask for the resources, but when we barely mention the resources and that we need them, we get completely slammed by our town leadership, who sees fit to say that we should only be advocating, in essence, they didn't say this verbatim, but in essence, we should only be advocating for that which what they're willing to provide. That's absurd to me. Our job as a school committee is to come up with a plan, and for the first time, since I've been on the school committee, I feel like this committee did an unbelievable job sitting down, really saying, what would we need to move us forward to out a level here? And we know that that's not an economic possibility for this community. I think we all can accept that. But the very problem that we can't talk about it or identify those resources so that potentially, at least we have a roadmap so that if grant funding becomes available, guess what? We already have a plan in place. We already know what holes to fill. So I'm venting too, but I'm just extremely frustrated. I don't know if you want to address that, and then I actually do have questions too.
Right. So let me address a couple things there. The first is around state production of some sort of curriculum template. So we don't have a particular thing for a curricular template for underperforming districts, okay? What we do have is, I think it's over 100 model curriculum units available to districts. So that created by educators that we convened to create it, not that we wrote them all. So those are available to all school districts, not just underperforming districts. Excuse me? A lot of tools. Yeah, and then there's tools to support the implementation thereof. So we have made advances there. I'd be happy to, have Laura share those with you through email. And on the resource side, I don't have a lot to add to that. I understand the frustration. The politics of the town are different in every town we come in that I speak to. And they all offer their unique challenges. And we try to work within the constraints that you're all operating under and try to understand those and try to do the best we can.
Thank you for that. I do want to say that, again, very hesitant to speak of my own experience here for a lot of reasons. I try to keep that separate. It's very difficult when you're on a school committee member and you're a parent. I've been quiet about a lot of stuff, and I'm starting just to get very frustrated. But I will tell you that in that Young Scholars Program, my children in 5th grade did more difficult work than they're doing in 9th grade right now. I can be very specific, and I will share that with some of those experiences with you privately, if you'd like, but I have very specific examples. And that Young Scholars Program was a great program. I think that Young Scholars Program could somehow maybe be replicated. So instead of trying to, ask those teachers what they're doing to engage the students, I'll give you an example. In the science curriculum, again, back to 4th and 5th grade, kids had a lot of hands-on experiences. They were given, if they were talking about clouds, for example, the teacher would bring them on a field, down to the field. Let's lay on our backs, let's look at clouds. What kind of clouds do you see? What's happening out there? As opposed to, I had an opportunity to witness a different room where the kids were looking at a textbook with clouds. Weren't even told to look outside, why can't what's happening in some of those advanced classrooms be brought down and the level of expectation of those students be raised? They're in front of us anyway. I don't understand why that's not a possibility. I think we should implement a Young Scholars Program in every classroom. Every classroom should be a Young Scholars Program. Every one of those students should be looked at as if they are a young scholar and their potential is limitless. And if you look at a lot of charter schools, what do they call their students? They don't call them students, they call them scholars. Good morning, scholars. Good morning, scholars. They don't call them kids, they don't call them problems, they don't call them trouble. They call them scholars. Kind of dress like for the career you want, not the career you have. maybe if we did some of that here for the kids, you know, metaphorically speaking, we'd get somewhere. Let's see, I'm sorry. One of the things that was mentioned in strategic objective number 4 was the elementary schools also provided programs to help parents understand what and how their children are being taught and how to support their children's education as parent partners. That's fantastic. That's the kind of thing that I think is needed here. Especially, I mean, at all levels, universally in the district. I think at every opportunity, it is wise to let parents know what's important. For example, we just got a bunch of data on tardies and absenteeism. So the next time that a phone call is made home, why don't we tell parents, we just had a report where tardies and absenteeism is a problem. You know, if there's a barrier for your child coming to school, please let us know. Let's see if we can figure this out. I don't think some parents know that coming to school is important. I truly do not think that that is known. And I think that there's an opportunity there, so that's more for our internal than yours. And I think I've kind of said my piece. I apologize I didn't have more questions. I thought I did, but like I said, everybody kind of answered those.
Please.
Again, the curriculum bothers me that we're just still talking about developing a curriculum. I mean, you can go on the internet and find curriculum. I don't understand the horse and pony show over a summer, bringing all these people together. I know there needs to be a buy-in, but I think the staff must be exhausted of developing curriculum over and over again, only to have somebody else come in, another leader, another whatever, the new people at the Department of Ed saying we need to develop a good curriculum here. That has to be exhausting for them. And so any assistance that could be provided by DESE would be, I'm just guessing, very appreciated.
Okay. And like I said, we'll be happy to share with some of the resources that we've made available.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Thank you so much for coming in this evening. Certainly appreciate it.
Yes.
It's 8:31, everybody. I'd like to call a 10-minute recess if I could. 10 minutes. Thank you.
You did very well.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate for having us.
I just want to say goodbye to them and thank them. (2015). The time is 8:45 p.m. Please note the presence of all school committee members on the dais, Superintendent Stanton, Finance Director Mr. Osborne, and our student representative Cam Boisford. And we're going to begin with Cam's report, a representative of the Student Advisory Committee. Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today at Southbridge Middle High School, all freshmen, sophomores, and juniors were called to the auditorium for an assembly for the course selection process. The students learned about what courses they needed to take to earn their proper credits. Students will consult with their teachers tomorrow to fill out their course selection sheets. The prom has been planned, and the date is set to May 22nd. Tickets are being sold for $60 each. Starting after the first week of May, students taking AP classes will have their tests to earn college credits. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good. Good for you. Awards. Okay. Now some reports of the school committee, budget and finance. Dr. Page?
No report, Madam Chair. The next subcommittee meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 4th at 6:00 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Negotiation and IBB. Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The negotiations subcommittee is still waiting for an MOA from our attorneys for the SEIU negotiations, and the SEA Unit A had a ratification meeting on the MOA. 135 members voted, 101 members voted yes in favor of the MOA, 33 voted no, and there was 1 abstention. So that passed by a great margin, and we are encouraged by that, and the IBB process was, I would say, a positive one for all involved, and we will be looking to ratify that MOA upcoming. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything new on the wellness?
The next meeting is scheduled tentatively for May 7th at 6 p.m. That is all.
Okay. Policy, we do need to schedule a meeting. I was considering May 6th, but wondering if maybe you'd want to piggyback, since we're some of the same members, May 4th. So I'll talk to my fellow members. So it'll either be May 4th or May 6th, dependent. That agenda will be posted timely. Report of the Finance Director.
I just want to update the school committee that the multifunction devices that were approved at the last meeting are being installed this week.
Good time.
That's it.
Proficient. Yep. Proficient. Thank you. And now for a report of the superintendent, Ms. Stanton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to announce Emily Mantinio as the new interim principal of Charlton Street School. Mrs. Mantinio has been a classroom teacher, technology integration teacher, and math IRS for the Southbridge Public Schools. Her knowledge and experience in the turnaround work for Charlton Street School makes her an exemplary person for the principalship. I am excited to have her energy, her enthusiasm, dedication, and commitment added to our district leadership team. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Mantinio as principal of Charlton Street School. Would you like to come up and say anything? No. I knew that. Briefly, you are aware that SchoolWorks has done a review of the Southbridge Middle High School. That review is complete, however, it is in draft form. We are giving feedback to SchoolWorks on that review. And we are, however, allowed to begin to develop our strategic action plan for Southbridge Middle High School, which would incorporate the AIP goals, the quarterly report information that you just heard about, principal dashboard data, and input from the staff. Because the report is still in draft form, I can't share specifics at this time. However, as soon as the report is finalized, I will be happy to share how the report will shape our next steps for Southbridge Middle High School. I did want to let the committee know that at our safety meeting this week, we reviewed our response to the SMHS evacuation. I want to thank again the timely response from local and state police and fire departments. Just to let you know, our monthly safety meetings are held with police and fire to improve our collective responses to safety events. I would like to thank the school committee policy subcommittee for their work on drafting the Crisis Response and Emergency Preparedness Manual. This manual at the meeting was shared with both the police and fire departments, and it has been given to them to review and give us feedback. And at the June meeting, we will discuss that input and make any revisions as necessary with their thoughts. And the next step would then be to develop the flip charts that schools have in classrooms and in the office so that we are all consistent in how we are responding to emergencies. And that is all.
Thank you very much. We're moving on to agenda item number 8, which is school committee actions. This would be a vote to confirm the last day of school as, I believe, June 23rd. Are we good on that? 2015.
So moved.
Mrs. Donovan makes the motion. Mr. Olivo seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on last day of school? I just want to say, is that a half day? Confirmed a half day?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, vote by show of hands. All in favor, it's unanimous. Thank you. Next is a vote to set the 2015-2016 preschool tuition fees. And I will just turn it over to Mr. Osborne. Did you want to speak to this?
Nothing more than what's there. You had amended slightly the text in emails with me. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Yes. So
yes.
I would defer to that. in terms of the semantics of exactly how that should be stated.
Okay. The preschool tuition fees last year were set at $2,500 annually, broken into 10 installments. The role of the school committee here is to vote on the fee that's been proposed, so they're recommending apparently no change in the fee structure. Families that qualify for a subsidy or think they might qualify for a subsidy can still apply and request that the sliding fee scale be applied to that request, and if they meet that, funds from the Department of Early Education and Care provide that subsidy.
Right.
So, somebody wants to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Congdon makes a motion. Dr. Page seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Osborne. I just had a quick clarification question on the actual district worksheet that was in our packet relative to the sliding fee scale. The title said full-day kindergarten tuition sliding, so I wasn't sure. Is this the right one, or was that an oversight?
Yes, I have no idea why it says kindergarten, and it is preschool.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, all right, thank you, that's all I had.
Okay. Any other discussion? No. So the question is to set the 2015-2016 preschool tuition fee to keep it at its current rate of $2,500. I'll show here.
Oh, I have a question.
Are we voting? Oh, no, question. I'm sorry.
For preschool, though, it's half day?
Yes.
Was there talk of full day? I thought there was like research or study or questionnaire, I think it was, asking parents. So I just didn't know if this is the decision that we've made to keep it half day, or if it will be full day and we're still working towards that decision.
We are working towards that potential proposal. I'm working with Mary Skripczak, the principal, who has the survey, we're working to compile the interest in the program and determine, what an appropriate rate should be, how that should look, and how we can allocate resources properly to make that happen if possible.
So then it'll be half-day preschool tuition fee schedule. I just wanted that point of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we set to vote. Any further discussion? Show of hands. It's unanimous. Thank you. And next is a vote to accept generous monetary donations from each of the following: the Southbridge Lions Club, the Southbridge Savings Bank, the Southbridge Credit Union, and Savers Bank. Do you want to speak to these?
Yes. A couple months ago, we received a donation from the school. The middle high school received a donation from the Southbridge Lions Club. There was some question about where that should go, so it took a little time to be processed. As we were processing it, we received 3 more checks. The Lions Club challenged these 3 banks to match their donation, and these 3 banks came through to meet those challenge funds. So those donations represent 4 checks in the amount of $500 each, totaling $2,000.
With my apologies to Dr. Page, I don't know if you want to split the vote. You're a Lions Club member, so I don't know if you...
I had nothing to do with that.
Okay. Are you comfortable there?
I'm
okay.
comfortable.
Chair,
it wasn't my proposal, and I did
with our thanks.
Okay. Mr. Abrahamson, oh, sorry.
Just one clarification, just in case people know. I think the money is to be earmarked to bring in outside speakers for the wellness program. Right. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a motion from Mr. Abrahamson, motion with our thanks. Seconded by Mrs. Congdon. Any further discussion? Show of hands. Thank you very much to these generous, for these generous donations. Thank you to all. Under unfinished business, superintendent search, 2 things to update everybody on. ProAct, which is a company, they are planning to come out on May 12th at 6 p.m., so it's before our regular meeting, to do a presentation. They're planning on about a half an hour. I said I allotted about 40 minutes total with questions and that, and they thought that would be good because they would be speaking maybe 20, 25 minutes or whatever, but that gives us the full hour in case it's needed before our meeting. So I want to make everybody aware that that would be...
Recorded publicly?
Yes, that will be publicly recorded, or we'll make a request that that be publicly recorded for the community's benefit. And also, at the last school committee meeting, the committee requested that I contact MASC about a survey. So I've done that. I think MASC right now is just very busy. Tomorrow is their day on the Hill, Advocacy Day. And, I have communicated with them, and we were working to coordinate a time to get together to discuss this survey, and I'll keep everybody updated on that. That's it. I added discussion under unfinished business of the FY16 budget, just to, if anybody wanted to speak to the FY16 budget. I know that since our meeting, there have been, there's an article that appeared in the newspaper, there's been some open meetings that have discussed it. This is just our opportunity again if we want to weigh in. Tomorrow evening, the Education and Human Services Subcommittee is holding a meeting, and they, on the agenda is a vote to, there's a vote to approve the school budget for next year. So I wasn't sure if people wanted to discuss it. Mr. Abrahamson?
My only comment would be, I would like to request that that be televised and that meeting be held here with designated people from our school committee matching the number of people on the town side, just so that we have that kind of orderly presentation and everyone can hear all the comments that are made.
I can submit that request to Councilor Peliquin.
Thank you.
See if she's, anything else? Does anybody have anything else to say about the budget? Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think from my perspective, as one of our primary roles as a school committee is to formulate the budget and oversee that, in that it's not overspent and those things. But I think in putting together a budget, this body, as was previously stated, sat down and said, these are our priorities. This is what we need and require in order to move this district forward. And did that thoughtfully and with the best intentions of students in mind and doing what was in their best interest. I think that that was what guided us to the number that we came to. I think there have been some misconceptions about that, and I think what we have done, which is what we are charged with, is presenting a budget that meets the needs of our students. That budget is then moved forward to town council. It is not a mandate that they fund that budget. It is a request. This is what we're requesting from the town. I think it's very apparent that that is not going to be met, but we have clearly outlined what our priorities for the budget are, what we're hoping to achieve, our goals with that budget, and I think that is what we're tasked to do, and doing anything less would be a dereliction of our duties. That's what we're called to do on behalf of the students of this town. And I think that that is what we have done. And then whatever the town determines, as is their right to fund us at whatever level that is at, then from that point, we make cuts to the budget based on what our goals are and how we're still going to be able to attain those goals, if we're able to attain those goals. And those programs or different things that aren't the priority and aren't part of the goal might be what's cut. We have to look at that, see what number comes back to us, and then have a really clear, focused, thoughtful discussion about where our priorities are and how we're going to continue to move this district forward. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Good. All right, thank you for that. Under new business, I'm just going to switch the order here and just say that the next regular school committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 12th, 2015 at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Remember, at 6 p.m. There will be a superintendent search presentation by a potential search firm. And I added to the agenda discussion about the Cole Ave building, McMahon Field, and Globe Fire buildings, only because in an article that appeared in the Telegram and Gazette recently, there was discussion about the disposition of those buildings, what to do with those buildings, and as a school committee, we don't have an opportunity to discuss that, and nor should we be discussing that, except in our official capacities on the dais. So I just wanted to bring that up and allow anybody an opportunity, if they wanted, to speak to this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The old maxim is if you wait long enough, someone will come up with your idea. We have been talking about this for a very long time. Now that the town manager considers it his idea, maybe we can get this done. So I will make a motion that we turn over to the town all the Cole Avenue property, McMahon Field, and the Globe Fire Building, and that the school offices relocate to the town hall, as has been offered, and that the maintenance for the schools be transferred to the DPW building, which has also been offered. It was suggested that we have been recalcitrant on making these moves, and I think we should have a decisive action tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Abrahamson makes a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Oh, seconded by Mrs. Quinney. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion on this? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if it would be better to, if I may, amend the motion to allow the superintendent to enter into some type of discussion with the town manager to see if this, in fact, is a viable possibility. I don't know if we have authority to just say, bing, bang, do it, locate and put these offices here and call it a day. There must be a process for that, so I see your point completely. I just don't know if it's the right process to give you the permission to meet with the town manager and begin that process.
If I may?
Yes.
We have already begun to investigate other locations. As I stated, I believe at the last meeting, we had considered Eastford Road as the potential. We again reconsidered that today, and for the safety of the students, it's just not feasible. We are in discussion with AO as they vacate a building and are moving to the Southbridge Conference Center, so they have space for us as well. And we are also talking to the town about moving back here. We do have some concern about that, but we are investigating options with the intention of moving out of Cole Ave.
I understand the amendment, and I just don't want to get into the conversation that the schools are insisting on this great big building, and they're only taking up this much space. This is what appeared in the paper. So let's understand that we give it to the town. Yes, the superintendent needs to have that negotiation ability, but it's an equal negotiation ability. It is not a monologue from the town manager to the superintendent. Our intention is to get those properties off of the school budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My other concerns, I echo what the previous speaker had said regarding authorizing the superintendent to have these discussions and explore those options. Other considerations I think we need to take into account are, is there actual room in said locations to house, like take for instance the DPW, do they have the room at the DPW to have our maintenance trucks and all those supplies and all that, and what does that look like? I think certainly authorizing the superintendent to explore that and come back with some data to us regarding what is the most feasible option, what the cost savings would be, and how to move forward in a thoughtful way. I don't think anyone has any great desire to waste money in the capacity in which we are being vilified for currently doing. So I agree we need to explore options that are more feasible, more cost-saving, and that are in the best interest of providing an education for the students within the district. So those are my concerns with the motion as it stands.
Mr. Leva?
Madam Chair, I just would like to say that I think that to make a decision like that is a bit premature this evening. I think we are in agreement that we want to get out of the buildings, but I guess allowing Superintendent Stanton would probably the authority to speak with the town councilor and kind of go through the negotiation process. I mean, we still don't know what the status is of our fields at the high school. Are they playable? Are they not playable? I mean, we've invested a lot of money to just say, hey, we're going to get out of this McMahon field and start playing on those fields for those fields to be torn up. I think that that's one of the big things and one of the holdups that I have with pushing forward with that decision tonight, is that we will have wasted a lot of money should we start on those fields prematurely.
Mrs. Congdon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand what everybody is saying. I know that the superintendent has been working hard to look into all of these other options, and I understand how much money we're spending and wasting by being in Cole Ave. I don't feel comfortable at this point without having a plan in place of where the school department's going, what's happening to all the storage that we have at the Globe building. And I understand that the superintendent's working on that right now, so I just don't feel comfortable voting on that at this point.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to point out that the Globe Fire Station was one of the buildings that the town of Southbridge was supposed to sell to defray the cost of the middle high school.
Right.
They couldn't sell it, so that's why we're there. But I think we should vacate and let them put it up for sale again.
Okay, so what we have is we have a motion on the floor that was seconded, but we have an amendment to the motion that was not yet seconded.
Who seconded Greg's
motion?
I'm not sure.
Mrs. Goody. So right now, the motion on the floor is to turn the properties over to the town of Southbridge. And it was more specific than that, my apologies. Do you have the wording of that motion?
I do. Motion made by Mr. Abrahamson to turn over to the town Cole Avenue, all the Cole Avenue property, McMahon Field, and Globe Fire Building. That the school offices relocate to the, oh boy, I guess I don't.
Madam Chair. I will withdraw my motion, but I would ask Ms. Donovan if she would add some kind of time to this. I mean, otherwise, this could go on forever, and we could be, again, accused of stonewalling. We need to have a time when this is done, and if you would make that motion, I'll withdraw.
How about this? How about we withdraw
I withdraw.
the motion, withdraw the second, Mrs. Quinney? Are you? Sure. And Mrs. Donovan, you can withdraw your amendment to the motion, and now we can make a new motion. So whoever wants to make the new motion, if in fact we want to make a new motion.
If I may.
Dr.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
And just, or maybe point of information, this is something that we've been under discussions with because it kind of falls under budget and finance. It's one of the topics on the agenda for the next meeting on Monday. And what we have been working on with the finance director and the acting superintendent is to get a really crystal clear idea of what the financial impacts are of our operation, all the revenues, the time we're spending dealing with the different tenants and all of this kind of stuff in order to make really an informed recommendation to the full school committee as to what should be done with these properties. And so that's kind of how I think it's in process. I don't think we can set a time. We can't give the superintendent a mandate on time because it involves other people that are outside of our control. I think the fact that she's working on it, we know she's working on it, and we have it's a regular topic on our budget and finance subcommittee meetings. So,
thank you.
We need, in order to get rid of it, we have to know where we're going to go, and that's still a little bit in flux.
Madam Chair, just as a point of information, is my colleague saying that the town manager did not make an informed decision?
I didn't say nobody's made a decision.
Well,
we want to make sure that we're making good...
His assertion that we can vacate the building.
We want to make sure we're making good, informed decisions about exactly what all of the financial impacts will be. If we have to rent someplace else, where are we going to go? What's that going to cost? If we have to get other storage space, if the town owns the storage space, is it available? Can we move what we need there? There's things that we need to put some quantitative framework around this, I think, before we can make a...
So it involves more than just a toss-off quote to a paper.
I think so.
Thank you. Madam Chair, perhaps we can bring this to committee?
If the policy, Budget and Finance Subcommittee is addressing this, that's probably a good place to be, and we'll get a report on that, and then we'll move forward on that. But I agree, I don't think we should drag this on forever. I mean, this is, we were called out on a lot of things.
It's one of our biggest priorities right now.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And I do just want to say that I don't have a problem with the buildings. What I do have a problem is the fields that are being prepped at the high school. That's what I have a problem with. We've invested a lot of money there, and to get on those fields prematurely would just be devastating, and it'll be money wasted, so.
I think the town could just take ownership or scheduling of the fields. They could still allow the football team to play there. It's just, so there are things to work out, and I think working it out in subcommittee is probably a great idea. Are we in agreement on that? So no need to take action tonight on that, but good to have the discussion nonetheless. Now it's time for member forum. Anybody have anything that hasn't been said? Agenda item number 11. Anybody? Mr. Abrahamson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't prepare anything, but I do want to refer to an incident that happened at the town council meeting last night. I want to assure you, Madam Chair, and the rest of my colleagues on this committee, that my speaking to the town about the budget, I stated that I was a member of the school committee speaking on my own behalf. People want to interpret that as speaking for the school committee. I can't control that. They'll say what they want to say, and they usually do. Madam Chair, without question, said something at a citizens' forum that was certainly something that would anger the town council. I knew that it would. It was in response, my response, to what I felt was not a legitimate criticism of our schools and our school district by the town manager and the head of the town council, Mr. Moriarty. I think some of the things that they said are egregious. And I feel that one thing that we do, and I'll speak for myself, when I was elected, it was to serve the interests of the students of this community. We don't have any power, none, zero, in terms of the budget. The only thing we can do is advocate for what's the best for them. After I spoke, I decided I was going to leave and was called out by one of the counselors, Counselor Carrasco, on television for saying, you know, thanks for leaving, that sort of thing. And so I came back thinking that we might have a dialogue. That wasn't the case. What happened was we just heard, I just heard the same things that have been said all along, the same things that were said in the newspaper article, the same unfair characterization. And I guess I'm kind of glad in a way that I stayed, because I would have missed the chairman's analogy when he talked about our school system. Everyone had their say. Oh, by the way, I want to say this right now. I want to thank Councilor Gus Steves for being the only person who came to the budget presentation from the town. The only councilor, town manager, none of them came. When it came to Councilor Moriarty's characterization, he said, giving to the schools, he said, it's as if you had a 24-year-old son who had wrecked the car a couple of times, had some bad relations, ran up a credit card, and came begging for $50,000. Would you give it to him as a parent? I would hope that anyone would be offended by that characterization of our schools. By the way, a parent does have some input into what a kid turns out like. You know? If that 24-year-old is that messed up, maybe the parent had something to do with it. I would just point this out, Madam Chair. I used to have a great deal of idealism when I started. I really don't have much of that anymore. But as long as I am on this committee, I am going to call out those things that are unfairly said about our students and this district. I would say, and I'll say this, if the counselor wants an analogy, then he ought to turn to Dickens and consider Oliver Twist in the workhouse, who dared to come up and ask for more. Please, sir, can I have some more? What? You want more? What do you do with the stuff we give you already? And who knows what you're going to do with it if we give you more? And we could have all kinds of, we could all stand behind Oliver and say, look, this is what the kid needs. Don't you understand that? And we could bring in every expert and they could all say, look, you're not treating Oliver right. And not one person there has the authority or the power to change that lot. It's the people in power, it's the town council who votes the budget. The school department does not have control of one penny. Not one. And I think that needs, all we have, according to them, is the audacity to point out what our students need. What a crime. I've said enough. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had the privilege of attending the National Honor Society and Thespian Honor Society induction since the last meeting, and I just wanted to congratulate those students for their achievement and thank everyone who put that on for the students. I think it was a great night, and this is another highlight of some of the really good things that are going on in our schools, and some outstanding students who have shown a great commitment to education and theater and being involved and taking pride in being part of the Southbridge School District. So I would like to congratulate them again on their achievement and congratulate their parents, because those kids are where they are in no small part to their parents and the support of their parents in those endeavors. So I just wanted to say congratulations again, and thank you to all who put in the time and effort to make that a special night for those kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but one of the words that Mr. Abraham mentioned kind of triggered something in my brain, and I don't think I'd be able to sleep tonight if I didn't get it off my chest. And the word was advocate, and I know that I have said this numerous times throughout my tenure up here, but no matter who is sitting in these chairs, we have to remember why we are here in these chairs, and that is for the kids in our town. And if we don't advocate for them, many of them have nobody else to advocate for them. And it's very difficult, as Mr. Abraham said, that there is the perception out there that the school committee has all the power. We're in charge of personnel, we're in charge of everything under the sun, when in fact we are in charge of literally nothing. And it's very, very frustrating, because you come here with good intentions and you want to make every change and every difference that you possibly can to make our classrooms better, to make our organization better, to make our town better, and yet you hit a roadblock and an obstacle at every turn. However, for myself, I just want it to be made perfectly clear that regardless of all that going on around me, I will never stop advocating for those kids in our town. And tonight I got a little worked up with Desi because it was personal for me. Everybody knows I have 3 kids, one in 8th grade, one in 7th grade, and one in the 3rd grade. And I worked very hard, my husband and I worked very hard to be good parents to make sure that those kids get what they need at home. And when they leave our home and enter our schools, the expectation is they will receive everything that they need and deserve. And so far, I've been very lucky. We've had a very fantastic experience. However, they are a very small minority that is having that experience. And our numbers in tonight's presentation clearly indicate that when you teach a grade 11 cohort class, a subject, and you test them, and only 4% can get proficient on that, what is the root cause of that? Somebody's not doing their job. Now, people will blame the parents, people will blame the teacher, people are going to blame the principal, people are going to blame the superintendent, people are going to blame me, people are going to blame everybody else up here. Yes, we all take some type of responsibility. But the information that was presented to us, and like Mrs. Quinney said earlier, not everybody in the public was privy to all the numbers that we were privy to, and if you want to be, call me, I'll tell you what they are. But at the end of the day, the data that the Department of Education has been collecting is atrocious. It's horrific, it's despicable, and it is outright a damn shame. And if people are okay with that, then keep on doing what you're doing. And I'm running to a point where I'm at the end of my rope as well with frustration, because I care, I want to make a difference, I want to make a change, and yet there's always something in the way for allowing that to happen for all kids. So I beg and I implore you that if you are in any position whatsoever to advocate for the child, your own child, or the children in our schools, regardless of who you are, if you can make a difference in their life, and if you can advocate for them, please do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. That's it. Agenda item number 12 is executive session. There will be an executive session tonight pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's bargaining or litigation position, and the chair so declares. I do so declare. We'll be going into executive session under that chapter to discuss potential litigation, the Southbridge Education Association, and Service Employees International Union Local 888. We'll also be discussing, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, to include our Director of Finance contract and the Supervisor of Maintenance and Facilities contract.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Abrahamson.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Congdon. Show of hands, please. It's unanimous. We will not be returning to open session. So we will we'll return to open session for the purpose of adjournment only, I should say. Thank you.